Hi everyone, it's Eric. Welcome to lesson 2 of OLE 3. This presentation is going to focus on one of the most important and one of the most challenging aspects of teaching online, and that's feedback. I'm going to walk you through a presentation that we give to our faculty about really thinking about meaningful and manageable feedback when it comes to teaching online. And I'm not thinking about feedback in terms of evaluating assessments. I'm thinking about feedback in terms of the little things that we do every day in bricks and mortar classrooms that we need to think about a little bit more strategically when it comes to teaching online. Let's take a look. So the really central 5 questions about taking your teaching online have to do with how you're going to connect with students, how you're going to connect students to each other, and how you're going to connect students to the material. And a huge part of that is feedback. We know that students come to online courses because the subject matter is interesting to them or they like the flexibility of the schedule. But what keeps students around is the feeling of being engaged with the material and connected to the teacher and their peers. And low stakes, regular feedback is one of the best ways to get your students invested in what your course is about. The good news is that we as bricks and mortar teachers do this kind of feedback every day almost instinctually. I mean, here are some examples of the things that we do when we're interacting face-to-face with students that are kinds of feedback. Students really crave this kind of interaction with teachers. The trouble is, how do you translate these things that we do in a bricks and mortar classroom into an online space? Here are some examples. You can like a discussion post. You can video chat with your students. You can use automated features to acknowledge to students that they've submitted an assignment on time to your course. Something as simple as using a student's first name is a way to give a student feedback and let them know that you know who they are and that you're paying attention to them. So again, we're not focusing on the evaluative aspect of feedback. We're focusing mostly on the relational aspect of feedback, that through giving these small little gestures towards students throughout your online and learning experience, you are acknowledging them and their work, and you're establishing a connection with them that's really important. Beyond the teacher to student relationship, there's also a really important peer relationship that happens in all classes. And in bricks and mortar classes, this sense of a group of students sitting on a table working on something together, that's a really important part of any course. But online, you don't have that shared physical space, that face-to-face interaction that works so well with group work. And so you need to think a little bit more strategically about how that will work. One thing we see a lot of teachers doing that works is simply having the students share excellent work with each other, using a wiki project or a collaborative document to post exemplars. And then instead of the teacher giving them instructions on what to do for an assignment, the students are learning from each other by looking at each other's work. Another thing we found works really well is very structured feedback and discussion. In other words, creating forms through Google Forms or Google or SurveyMonkey that allows students to work on giving feedback to each other. Doing a lot of teaching around how to get feedback to your peers, especially in writing, has worked really well in our courses. And then lower stakes things like encouraging students to vote in Google Moderator, to like in a discussion forum, or to +1 in a Google Plus community. Those small gestures can really help students feel like their peers are paying attention to the work that they're contributing to the course. There's also this question of sort of the culture of an independent school. And I think the culture of the independent school revolves around interaction and accessibility. And teachers are expected to be accessible to students and also expected to give substantial feedback to students on assessments. Notes in the margins of an essay or a lot of feedback on lab reports, whatever it is. Students and teachers in independent schools are really accustomed to frequent and meaningful feedback. And so one thing that we encourage teachers to do online is try to translate that accessibility and meaning into an online space. Hold virtual office hours so that students can look you in the eye on a regular basis. Create and nurture a discussion forum or Google Plus community that students are not using just for academic work, but also to ask for help or raise a question. Students should feel like a discussion forum is not a place for them to be assessed necessarily, but a place for them to connect. There's Lots of different ways to give feedback online, and I would actually use that to your advantage. Think about multimedia feedback. Rather than emailing feedback to 18 different students, can you create one engaging video that directs itself at all your students at once? Is there a way for you to make multimedia feedback? Can you write? Can you record? Can you videotape in a way that allows students lots of different looks at feedback? One thing that's great about the online learning space is the asynchronicity. It gives people time to think and reflect about their work. And that might be a great way to give even more meaningful feedback than might be possible in a bricks and mortar classroom. These are the structures that support feedback in a brick and mortar classroom. Really has to do with physical space and evolution. I mean, we're all in a brick and mortar space, we're all shoved into the same building and we are sort of running into each other constantly. And that's a really great support for regular interactive feedback. There's also the fact that as human beings, we're just used to interacting face to face. We are used to paying attention to voice and facial expressions and eye contact. Those things really matter. Unfortunately, that sort of live spontaneity doesn't exist as often in an online learning space. And so you need to think about intentional and manageable ways to give feedback to your students. These are some points that I would really strongly encourage you to think about. This idea of early curriculum development, goal orientation for you and your students, automated feedback through quizzes and polls, strategic use of technology, and good curation of technology. What are the tools that work best for you? What are the tools that will be most effective for your audience, whoever they may be, whatever age they may be? And what are some new things that you can try that you think that might work for you? The bottom line is you really do need to think about feedback as it works from the beginning towards the end of your online learning experience. Students can't wait for feedback until they've completed the final project. They need to get it throughout the experience. It's sort of the way that they can feel. It's sort of like the feeling of going to class every day. That sense of getting a little bit of feedback from the teacher or from peers or from the course every single day really will help them feel engaged and produce the best work possible for you. So as you finish up designing your online experiences this week, really think about that as a way to communicate with your students, to connect with your students, and to keep your students engaged with the experiences you're designing. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing what you guys produce this week.